Bigfoot, Dogmen, Jersey Devil, and others. Are they real misidentifications? Or the most cleverly disregarded reality of all time? Come into the cabin and sit down and let's try to find out together. Hey guys, welcome back to the cabin. I'm Robbie.
I'm Steve.
I'm Johnny again.
Hey, Steve, was that like 3 in a row that he's been Johnny?
Yes, he is.
Well,
I'm proud of you, Johnny.
I'm proud of myself. Good meds are hard to find.
That's true. That's very true. Unless you're one of those people who just seem to have meds on them at all times. So, we've been kind of wanting to do an episode about Native American folklore, but there's just so much. We just kind of decided we were going to cut it down to one and do like maybe one every couple of episodes. So, I picked one this time, Johnny. I know you're more Seminole, and I'm Cherokee, so I picked the Cherokee one this time. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I know Steve kind of has read a little bit about it, but this is called the Stoneclad. And if that sounds a little bit familiar, it's kind of got some rough, loose tie-ins with the Genoskwa, the Stonish Giant. But in Cherokee, it is pronounced Nun-yu-nui. So, but it has tie-ins with Stonecoat, which is the Genoskwa, the Stonish Giant from the Iroquois, and actually some Wendigo tie-ins from some of those. There's like, what, 2 or 3 different tribes up there, Johnny, that
At least.
yeah. So it's got some loose tie-ins with that too. But I'm just going to read this little brief synopsis of what they say about it, and then we'll just kind of break into some discussion about it. Stoneclad is a monster from Cherokee folklore. Details about the Stoneclad vary from telling to telling. In some versions, there's only one, while in others, there's a whole race of Stoneclads. In some versions, Stoneclad is a man-sized or indeed is a human witch that has turned himself or herself into a invulnerable monster. In others, he is a stone-skinned giant like the Stonecoats of the northern Iroquois tribes, which is what we talked about, tying in with the Genoskwa. So it's kind of, I guess, depending on what part of the Cherokee Nation you're hearing this story, this may be their version of the Stonish Giant. We'll kind of get into a little bit of that a little bit later about what that is and why they were called what they were called. I don't know if this is called that for the same reasons, but we'll get into that. In all cases, he has rock-like plates of armor that protect him from fire, cold, weapons. He is defeated only through sapping his magical power by destroying his talisman or exposing him to, and I'm just reading this, menstruating women. But
Well, that always carried weight, in all the old cultures.
yeah, it did. And all joking aside, that was a big, because I can't remember which show it was, but on DAX Machina we were talking about one Native American folklore, and they were talking about that they took the menstruating women and put them all in a lodge in the middle of the village to protect them at that time of the month from whichever creature it was we were talking about. And I can't remember which one it was, but there's a lot of legends that talk about stuff like that. So, but the reason the Stonish Giant or the Genoskwa or whatever you want to call them is called that is, we were talking about this earlier, Johnny. They were reported to go out and roll around in the river mud and coat their fur in that thick mud. Then they would go rolling those round river rocks and let the rocks dry on their fur, and that would in effect give them a coat of armor, basically. And arrows couldn't pierce that. And reportedly, these were the ones that were going into the villages and snatching women and children and taking them. And I think that is what they said. They started with what started the Iroquois, at least, trading with the white man to get these repeating rifles so they could go after these things. So
Yeah, the 45-70 is a little different than a bow and arrow.
Yeah, just a slight bit more punch in that 45-70. So, Steve, what do you think?
So the rolling around the mud with rocks, was that Indians doing that, or is that
Now,
a
that was
legend?
supposedly the Genoskwa, which was a type of Bigfoot. It was
Okay.
and that's what that was how they combated the bow and arrow from the Native Americans. Was they would go roll around in the river mud, and then once they got their fur coated in that mud, then they would go roll around those round river rocks and get them stuck to their skin or to their fur. And then once that dried, that would stone coat or a stonish giant.
So that's your primitive Kevlar.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean-
definitely a good idea.
Yeah. And here's the thing. This was, hundreds of years ago when they were talking about this. How do you come up with something like that if you didn't really see it?
And that shows intelligence. If it was, say, a
that's-
Bigfoot or something, that's definitely an intelligence.
That's tool usage.
Yes.
That's a spooky intelligence.
Yeah,
Yes.
very much. But it's like we said, it's tool usage, and so I guess, like I said, it depends on which area or which band of Cherokees you're hearing these stories from as to what version you're actually hearing about. But I think for our standpoint, for what we look at, we don't say that it's impossible that it's a witch or a warlock or whatever. But I think for us at this show, I think we would look more as this was probably something that was more along the lines of a Genoskwa. And we know that they're not all stuck in one area. I mean, they may stay in an area a lot more, but yeah, I personally tend to believe that this was, that type of Bigfoot that just was doing that, or maybe like how Vikings, when they would travel and they would see something one culture would do and they would bring it back to their culture. Who's to say these Bigfoot weren't the same way? That some of these that we had around this area, either traded or just traveling through and saw some of this stuff and like, hey, we got these little hairless apes down here that shoot those things at us too. That's a pretty good idea. I mean, if they got the intelligence that we're thinking about, that is not beyond the realm of possibility to think something like that might have happened.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if there's any recent stories or anything in reference to that.
I don't know. This was kind of like a history that I pulled up. I didn't pull up anything recent, or I didn't see anything. I'll say it that way. I didn't see anything recent about it.
One of my good friends is Cherokee Indian. He said he remembers when he was a child that there were stories that the elders would tell about. It was a witch or something to do with witchcraft or something of that nature.
Yeah, and that's like I said, I think that was depending on what band you were listening to or talking to or hearing it from. That's because when it brings up if you pull up the pictures of it, there's a couple of pictures that look more like a Genoskwa, and then there's a couple that look like just kind of like what you would consider a rubble golem, or just a stone golem. Looks more like that. So, like I said, I guess really just depends on where you're at or where you're standing on the map as to which version you were going to be hearing about. Yep, the Sukaloo. That was we actually did a show on that, didn't we, Johnny?
Yep.
And that there was some debate on whether that was actually a spirit or whether it was actually a Bigfoot. So if that's just the Cherokee version of the Bigfoot, and it did stuff like this, you can kind of see where some of this stuff might get. Somebody sees a normal Bigfoot, and somebody sees a Bigfoot that's basically covered in stones.
The Sukaloo, didn't it have a few little traits of Skinwalker too?
Yeah, there was, and that's, you remember when we did a show on Tennessee Wild Man? and every description or every encounter, somebody described it a little bit different. Somebody described the smell like a skunk ape. Somebody described that it builded structures kind of like a grass man. I mean, it just everybody's description was just a little bit different about what they were actually seeing, and it might have a little bit of trait from this specific one that you've seen. And I think some of the stuff that we talked about that show were, depending on what area these creatures are living in, that particular grass that the Ohio grassman builds its nest out of, it only grows in that area.
Really?
Yeah. So, it just kind of stands to reason that if they're going to build these structures, and think about this, Johnny, what does those structures look like to you?
They're weird.
Yeah, they're weird, but imagine looking at that structure, but just imagine that it looks like the entrance to a cave.
Yeah.
So if our theory that all three of us have talked about, if the subterranean theory is correct, and let's say these animals are subterranean most of the time, but they're out traveling around, and they're in this area where that particular type of grass grows, and they need shelter for whenever, and they build it. Is it just a big coincidence that it looks like a cave entrance? And, how many animals build nests that totally encompass them? And you've seen plenty of them on, pictures online and the documentaries and all that kind of stuff. Most all of them are totally enclosed.
Yeah.
So I just think that this is maybe something that is kind of genetic memory. Is that what I'm trying to think of? Where it's something that's done, like orcas, for example. Some orcas hunt seals. Some orcas hunt fish. But these orcas know how to do this stuff instinctively, but they know how to do it, and they've never been shown how to do it, but they know how to do it because of these genetic memories. And I think that's the right term that I'm using. But basically, one or some part of their ancestral lineage did this, and it is ingrained in their genetic memory. Therefore, they kind of know how to do this kind of stuff. This could be the same thing we're looking at here. If there are or were primarily cave dwellers, years, hundreds of years ago, somewhere in that genetic memory, it may be, hey, I'm supposed to be inside a cave, and they construct their structures to look like a cave. I mean, that might be a stretch. Might look like we're reaching for the stars on that, but I don't think it's...
I think that's possible, because you have certain canine that want to burrow underneath blankets and want to stay in certain areas. I think that's just, I don't know, human nature or animal traits, but all those things I think are very possible.
Yeah, and I may be wrong on the term. It may not be genetic memory. It may be, but I think that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
Somewhere down the line, that kind of stuff has happened, that their ancestors have had to do that. And I think some of that stuff is even in humankind, some of the stuff that we just almost instinctually know how to do, that you're like, well, how do you know how to do this? You've never been shown how to do that. But it's just encoded in our DNA that we know how to do this kind of stuff.
That's like certain dogs. Great Pyrenees, they herd and protect, and they stay up at night and they bark and they do. You don't really train them to do that.
Yeah.
That's an instinct. They do that.
Yeah, and German Shepherds, they have been bred to be that type of working dog. And you have a German Shepherd that you don't do a whole lot with, they will drive you up the wall. I know. I don't get to do a lot with my German Shepherd, and he drives me up the wall just wanting to go out and wanting to run, wanting to do that constantly.
Working dogs.
But he's never been a working dog. So
they still have that in him.
Where does he get that drive from? So, I know we kind of went down that rabbit hole off the rails type stuff, but Johnny, would it be one of our episodes, or if we didn't?
If we ain't chasing rabbits, I don't know. Herding cats, whatever.
Yeah, we're herding cats.
This Sukaloo. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Sukaloo.
Now that's in just one area in North Carolina.
Yeah, there's Judiculla Rock is where that's primarily that's where that's attached to, and it's a whole big legend. And like I said, there are people who believe that that what has been seen is simply just a Bigfoot, and there's some people who believe it's more of a spirit or something like that. But I'm not even going to try to recall the Judiculla Rock thing because it's a really big, complicated story.
It's worth going and seeing.
Yeah, it is.
It ain't too far outside of Silva.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But that's where you said that you got to watch the GPS because it drives you through somebody's fence or something like that.
Yes.
Wasn't you saying that, Johnny?
Yes, it's terrible.
Yeah, but it's a cool legend. I mean, it's like the Wampus Cat. Well, me and Johnny did. That was one of the first episodes that Johnny and I did by ourselves, and we sat down, and we started looking into this thing. And it was just like, wow, this is just like you just don't think when you hear Wampus Cat, you don't think there's all this stuff tied to it. But I mean, it was actually a pretty beautiful story when you really get down into it. You know, the woman was, correct me if I'm wrong, this Johnny, but her husband got killed by this thing, and then she went and begged the village elders to let her go after it, and they made her a mask or something like that. But the whole story itself was just like, it's just so well put together and so.
And this isn't in the same area?
Yeah, this is a Cherokee legend.
And it's near Silva.
Well, I mean, eastern band.
You skirt Silva to get to it. I remember that on my trip.
There's a lot of strange things that's going up there.
Yep.
In that area.
Oh, that whole area of the Appalachian Mountains is a hot spot. I mean, you know, and we don't give them credit as far as being legitimate cryptozoologists or anything like that. But there's a reason that show, that Mountain Monster show, was so popular. It's because a lot of these, you heard me when we were in there looking over these legends. A lot of these things, Spearfinger, the Ravenmocker, the Wampus Cat, all these things, these are true legends in Cherokee folklore, but they went and, did their own little shows, which, they put their own little Hollywood spin on it, which they got to. They're trying to, get ratings and things like that. But that's why I told you, you don't know what you're finding when you try to research this stuff. You don't know if some of it's coming from that, which is, a lot of Hollywood mumbo jumbo versus the true legend. So you gotta really be careful when you're looking into this and make sure it's not tied into that anyway. Because they did a show on Spearfinger, they did a show on Ravenmocker, they did a show on the Silver Giant, that big bear. What's some other ones they did, Johnny?
I never watched that show.
They did Cherokee Devil. Well, it's not hard. You start searching these Cherokee legends, and they've done just about every one of them. So, shows like that are okay, but sometimes they make it hard for us who are actually out here wanting to, separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, and then, but they get out there and have these, Robin Hood is a merry band of idiots.
Yes.
And it makes anybody that would credibly listen to those of us who are seriously trying to figure this out, they're like, I'm not going to listen to you. Listen to these guys. So I don't know. That's my soapbox about them. I can't say I haven't watched a show and I haven't enjoyed the entertainment value. But that's what you got to look at it for, is entertainment. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about on our shows. And it just, sometimes it kind of irks me that some people just can't make that disconnect between the entertainment versus us looking at things that have actually happened and trying to untie all these knots that that we're coming across with this.
Now, Silva is not far from Bryson City.
I was about to say, this is all right in...
And that's where our gentleman was missing
yep.
on April.
This is all right
22nd.
around that missing 401 area that we talked about.
Oh, our camper.
Mm-hmm.
I was just fixing to ask if there's any updates on that.
Yeah, he's
not that I'm aware of.
I think they pretty much pulled everybody out now, hadn't they?
They had right at 30 different search teams. I think they finally called it off.
Yeah. So, but that whole area, and what did we say? There was even at least 2 more.
Yeah, there was another lady from that.
Yeah,
same
that's the one that was walking from one campsite to the other and disappeared in between 2 campsites.
That was recently?
No, it was
back in the 70s, I believe.
But it was in that exact same area where this
same
kid.
campsite.
Oh, okay.
Or the kid, this guy, because this wasn't the kid. This was the. But there's things that happen up there in those mountains. You know, whether people want to admit or believe or whatever, something. People go missing up there all the time and missing without a trace. And, you know, it's like we talked. What did you say, Johnny? The elevation was what, 1,100 or 1,700 feet, something like that.
I think it was 1130 or 1170, something like that.
I mean, that's high if you fall off of it, obviously, but that's not so high that you would think that it would hinder any kind of.
There's no altitude sickness or nothing with that. That's not even ears popping.
No. So,
well, I was in that area 2 weeks ago, and in Franklin, North Carolina, and I was on the Appalachian Trail about 4 miles in, and you have 0 cell service. I mean, you get a satellite on your phone. So, I mean, we drove probably 10, 15 miles before we ever got to the trail.
yeah.
I mean, there's no power. There's no dirt roads. I mean,
Well, and that, that's why we
old abandoned houses and spooky looking houses from 40 and 50 years ago.
Yeah.
You're definitely off grid there.
Yeah, well, but then there again, that's why we say most of these people who like that guy in particular, this was not his first time doing this.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go do something like that, you need to make sure somebody knows where you're going, when you're supposed to be checking in, because I like to call it the Indianapolis effect. How long they were 2 weeks overdue before they were reported. Wasn't it, Johnny, something like that?
You talking about the
USS,
the ship that went off?
Yeah, because they delivered that bomb and it was so secret nobody knew where they were at. So they were like, I want to say 2 weeks overdue before anybody ever reported them missing. So you get in a situation like that, you're lost in the middle of the ocean. Yeah. If nobody knows where you're at or when you're supposed to be, wherever you're supposed to be going, you've lost in the middle of the ocean. Because that's in effect what you are. If you get in the middle of some of that wilderness like that, it's just like being lost in the middle of the ocean. 6 in one, half dozen in the other.
As I've looked into some of the GPS locators where you can send text messages or send something for emergency. There's several different out there, and I hadn't decided which one, but I think.
Oh yeah,
that's a direction that I'm gonna have to go.
Yeah, and that's obviously if we start doing some of the stuff that we talked about doing, we're gonna have to look into something like that, because if 4 or 5 of us are out there, and something happens, we're gonna need a way to.
I was in West Virginia recently, and we had no satellite service. I was in Tennessee, near Tellico Plains, and it was almost an hour to the nearest gas station.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no cell service. I mean, there's no power, no nothing.
Yeah, I mean
you are so remote that the animals are very close. So.
Yeah, but if you're going to take that responsibility on and go out there, you need to make sure that you're prepared. And I mean, if you're going out there for 3 days, I would say as a safe bet, you need to be prepared to be able to survive for at least a week and a half if something happens. Bare minimum.
Yeah.
Because if you go out there for 3 days and you're prepared for 3 days and something happens, weather comes in and catches you, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I don't step in the woods without the right gear.
Yeah.
I'm very particular about that.
And, I'm not going to say, cause we talked about Julian Sands before, and he was a very, very experienced hiker, but I don't know how prepared he was for this trail he was on, because this was not supposed to be like one of the most serious trails he's ever been on either, the one he disappeared off of. So, you get, it's just like our profession, Steve. Sometimes you get complacent. When you get complacent, that's when you get hurt.
Yep.
You can't ever get complacent You know, I'm sure you same way. You hate the word routine, right? There's no such thing as routine when you're doing, especially when your life's involved. You know, it's not a routine climb up a mountain. It's not a routine hike in the woods. You know, anytime you're in a situation where not just the animals that we're talking about that may or may not exist, snakes, bears, wolves, you know, nature itself, deadfalls, widowmakers, loose boulders. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways that something out there in that wilderness can hurt you bad or even kill you.
And I've even looked in some of the medevac insurance. I mean, I have friends who have that. I mean, there's a big. If you ever mash that emergency button, I mean, there's going to be
a life
bills,
flight helicopter.
There's going to be bills behind that in certain areas. There's some different things with that, but I mean,
well, I mean, I had a supervisor one time at this department that they didn't provide a flashlight. They're like, okay, you got to go buy your own flashlight. And this is when I was a lot younger and a lot dumber. And I'm like, I guess I'll go to the dollar store or auto parts store and buy me a $10 flashlight or something like that. And he's like, oh, okay, if your life's worth $10. He said, is your life worth $10 out here at night when you got a flashlight that's not going to stay charged? He said, or is your life worth a $130 flashlight? And, you know, when you start thinking about it in terms like that, you know, is your life worth going out with 3 days worth of being prepared unless something bad happens, and you know, is your life worth carrying a little bit of extra weight and a little bit of extra discomfort just to make sure you got everything you need? You know,
I make sure. I mean, my wilderness partner, when we go out in the woods, we make sure we have gear. I don't go 10 yards in the woods without my chest pack on or the gear I carry. If we know there's no cell service, we carry extra stuff. I mean, if there's snakes, we're wearing snake guards. I mean, we just try to prevent that. But a lot of hikers and things think that's uncool. I'll be fine, but
I'm going to go out there in flip-flops.
Yeah, when you get out there 3 miles in the middle of the night and, you know, you don't have a water bottle with you and you don't know where the closest stream is, and I mean, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, and especially if you're not, let's say you're not hiking on a trail, you're on one of these, you know, you
made your own trail. Yeah.
Easy to get turned around. If you don't know how to read a topo map, or you don't know how to do dead reckoning or read a compass, and so many people nowadays are so dependent on their, I got GPS on my cell phone. Yeah.
That, I won't say all the time, but a lot of times that's not accurate, even between transferring coordinates from different maps.
Oh yeah,
they'll put you in the wrong spot and everything else.
We've tested that out. My partner's got one, because you know, a lot of times on Rex we have to put the GPS coordinates on it. He's got one app, I've got another, and we were standing side by side, and each of us had different latitude and longitude, just because they were different apps. I mean, you can't depend on stuff like that. Electronics will fail you. And I'm not saying that if you have it and that's all you got, don't use it. But you can't depend on that little piece of plastic being your lifeline.
And then you would get there and you want to download a map, and you can't download it because you don't have enough cell data.
Yeah, you better download it beforehand.
Yeah, you better download it before you get there.
Because I use CalTopo.
Okay,
that's the one when I went through my tracking class. That's the one that they recommended, and that's got the feature that you can download the map, and then it doesn't matter if you got service or not. The map's there, so unless something changes in between the time that you've downloaded the map and that you're there, it's going to be there, and you're able to use it whether you have service or not. So at least you have the map, and you got the topo on it. And for those of you who don't understand what we're saying, topo stands for topographical map, and that's the one that shows you the different elevations, streams, roads. What else, Steve? What am I missing?
There's some that have history maps and everything. I use 3 different ones, maybe 4. But Google Map everybody uses that. But the problem is if you download a Google Map, you're going to be in the woods, and let's say that you added points. You created your own waypoints on there. You can't use that without cell service.
Yeah.
So if you do not have cell service, everything you downloaded and put on Google, you can't see it. You can do that on other maps, but I learned that the hard way. When I was in an area without cell service, I couldn't.
That's why I like that CalTopo.
Yeah, 40 points we downloaded, and we converted it over to some other Onyx maps and things. But
well,
you got to watch what you can and can't do off grid.
That's pretty accurate, because we were doing a show the other night, DAX, and we got some GPS coordinates from. We actually got the coordinates for, and DA had no clue that he had written this so close. But the very first Wild Hunt book, it took place in Oklahoma. That's actually where the Oklahoma Bigfoot Wars took place. That same national forest. He had no clue it happened. So we got coordinates. And I put it in CalTopo. Noah sent it to me in a private message, and I put it in CalTopo, and it popped it right up. And it was right there in that, I can't remember the name of it, but it's not far from Heavener, where the Heavener Stone is in Heavener, Oklahoma. Okay. It's not far from that. But those coordinates brought that national park right. It was like Broken Bow Lake or something like that. But it was pretty interesting when we started talking about it and started piecing out, because we were just doing a show on the Oklahoma Bigfoot Wars. And later on in the show, we start putting pieces together and find out that he actually wrote Codename Wild Hunt, Odin's Call, before he even knew that the Bigfoot Wars took place right where he was pretty much setting the Wild Hunt in their first book. So, nice little, we call it Easter egg, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah.
This is the one y'all just did Saturday?
I think that one was last week, maybe. Yeah, it's whenever we did the one on Oklahoma Bigfoot Wars. That might have been last Saturday. I don't know. I'll
have to look it up, because I've been so covered up I haven't had time to do a 3-hour stream.
It was either Saturday or Wednesday. I can't remember which. Things start running together, but I do remember that it was that one, because Noah and I were all kind of looked at each other at the same time, like, wait a minute, Oklahoma Bigfoot War took place here, Oklahoma, and we started looking at coordinates, and we got map. DA pulled up a Google map, and then we got coordinates off of it. Noah sent it to me, and I put it in CalTopo, and it popped it right up.
Cool.
It was pretty cool, pretty interesting. You kind of see DA's face light up, like, I had no idea that I set this, because that's actually a pretty interesting story. The Oklahoma Bigfoot Wars. Have you heard anything about it, Steve?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, that's the one. You've heard of the Light Horseman? What was those? I can't remember their name, but anyway, they were. It's kind of funny because they called them the Light Horsemen because they were so good. They were Native Americans, but they were so good on horses, they started calling them Light Horsemen. But the smallest one of the bunch, the smallest son of this guy, was 6'7" and over 300 pounds. Okay. And he was the smallest of the
I think I've
heard
of
the
it
bunch.
Before. Yeah.
And supposedly what happened was these Bigfoot were, or whatever they were at the time, they didn't call them Bigfoot, but it started out they were just kind of stealing stuff from the white settlers and the Native Americans, and then it kind of went into, okay, some, the women and children are getting taken, so this group of Native Americans decided they were going to go after it, and that's where they got the name of the Light Horseman. And the leader, and I can't remember what his name was either, and I'm going to feel so stupid when DA tells me the name of these guys, because it's kind of a popular name. I've heard it plenty of times before, but they talked about the Light Horseman. They go out there where they thought these things were happening. They start getting the smell, like, what's going on? Well, as they kind of crest the ridge, they see 3 of these things standing there looking at them. They were just described as huge, hairy creatures. So the guy in charge, he takes off in a charge after this thing, and I guess the thing didn't really, it kind of stunned it, and I can't remember if it happened on that first charge or if it happened after that, but basically the guy's horse head got swiped off, but he ended up taking that one out. Well, then another one came up behind him, pulled his head off, and then the others, the little fellas, they decided to, okay, we need to join in because we just saw our leader get his head ripped off, so they take off into it and they end up killing the rest of them.
I've heard that.
Yeah,
I've heard that story on maybe a podcast or something in the past.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. Yeah, and I'd heard of the White Horseman before, but I'd never heard that this was a story. Well, it's proven fact that these guys were real people, but we don't know if how they were killed is really the way that happened or not. But so we're actually trying to plan a trip out to Oklahoma to this place to see if we can get out there and see what we can find. So y'all boys welcome to jump in if you want to.
Sounds like a trip.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a trip down another rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That would be a fun rabbit hole to go down. So, anyway, well, that's all I got on the Stoneclad. Steve, you got anything else?
No, sir. I mean, I think it's a good talk.
Yeah.
They've kind of opened the door a few different places.
That was good.
Yeah.
Learn something every trip.
Yeah. I mean, and what we had on that was kind of really brief, but, and obviously we go down a rabbit hole talking about other stuff, but I think we relatively stayed on topic of what we were talking about. So, but, all right, guys. Well, that's all we got from the cabin this time. And remember, if you're going to go out on one of these trips, make sure you're prepared. Get you a Dark Angel medical kit. We're going to we got to plug the man. But get you some kind of IFAC, individual first aid kit. Whether it be the best, whether you get a Dark Angel or whether you have one, at least get something. Make sure you got somebody knows where you're going to be, when you're going to be there, when you're supposed to be back. Make sure you got provisions for, longer than you're supposed to be out there. And there's another one. If you heard about if you're going to be on a trail, taking the tinfoil and putting your boot print down on it and leaving it in your car, that's a pretty good. I heard that one the other day, and I thought, man, that makes a lot of sense, because that way they can distinguish you from 20 other people that's walked around you that didn't know you were missing. So, Johnny, you got anything else?
I'm done.
You done. He done. All right, folks. We're going to see you next time at the cabin. Thanks for stopping by with us.
Y'all have a good one.
Have a great evening.